The dark void of space stretched endlessly in all directions, cold and silent. Among the scattered stars, a small alien ship moved slowly through the emptiness. The ship belonged to the Zephyrians, a race of tall, thin beings with gray skin and large black eyes. They were scientists and researchers, always looking for new things to study and understand. Chief Researcher Kethlar stood on the bridge of their vessel, the silent observer. His long fingers moved across the control panels as he studied the readings on his screen. Something had caught their attention during their routine survey of this distant star system. Something very interesting. "Sir, we are getting closer to the object," said Navigation Officer Plextar from his station. "It appears to be a large vessel of unknown design." Kethlar nodded slowly. The Zephyrians were always careful and methodical in their work. They never rushed into anything without proper study and planning. This was how they had survived and prospered in the galaxy for thousands of years. "Bring us alongside," Kethlar ordered. "Activate all sensors. I want to know everything about this vessel." Before we proceed, as the silent observer drew closer, the alien ship became clearer on their screens. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of their own research vessel. The hull was old and scarred, showing signs of long exposure to cosmic radiation and micrometeor impacts. Strange symbols were painted on the side, symbols that none of the Zephyrians recognized. Dr. Veltar, the ship's xenobiologist, moved to stand beside Kethlar. Her scientific instruments were already scanning the mysterious vessel. "The design is crude but functional," she said, her voice carrying the typical Zephyrian tone of calm analysis. "The materials are basic metal alloys, nothing sophisticated, but the construction is solid." "Any signs of life?" Kethlar asked. "The ship appears to be completely powered down," Dr. Veltar replied. "But I am detecting some very faint energy signatures from the interior. It is possible that some systems are still functioning on minimal power." Primdek, their cultural analyst, approached the group. He was older than the others, with more wrinkles around his large eyes. "Chief Researcher, I recommend extreme caution. We have no knowledge of who built this vessel or what their intentions might have been." Kethlar considered this advice. The Zephyrians had encountered many different species in their travels through the galaxy. Some were friendly, others were hostile, and many were simply indifferent to outside contact. It was always wise to be careful when dealing with the unknown. "Begin a detailed scan," Kethlar decided. "I want to know the ship's origin, its purpose, and whether it poses any threat to us." The next several hours were spent in careful observation and analysis. The Zephyrian scientists used every tool at their disposal to study the alien vessel. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. "The design suggests a colony ship," Dr. Veltar reported. "The internal structure shows large areas that could be used for housing many individuals. There are also what appear to be storage areas for supplies and equipment." "How old is it?" Kethlar asked. "Based on the level of cosmic radiation damage and the wear patterns on the hull, I estimate the vessel has been drifting in space for approximately 200 of our years," Dr. Veltar said. Technical specialist Grexmon looked up from his instruments. "I have been analyzing the symbols on the hull. They do not match any known language in our databases. However, the mathematical principles used in the ship's construction suggest a species with intelligence comparable to our own." "Any indication of what happened to the crew?" Primdek asked. Dr. Veltar adjusted her scanners to penetrate deeper into the vessel. "This is very interesting," she said after several minutes. "I am detecting what appear to be thousands of individual life signs, but they are extremely faint, almost as if the occupants are in some form of suspended animation." Kethlar's eyes widened slightly. Suspended animation was not unknown in the galaxy, but it was extremely difficult to maintain for extended periods. Most species could only manage a few years at most before the process became fatal. "How many life signs?" he asked. "Approximately 12,000, Dr. Veltar replied. "They appear to be distributed throughout the ship in what look like individual chambers or pods." The bridge fell silent as the Zephyrians absorbed this information. A colony ship carrying 12,000 beings in suspended animation, drifting through space for 2 centuries. It was a remarkable discovery. We should board the vessel, Dr. Veltar said. This could be the greatest xenobiological discovery in generations. Think of what we could learn about this species, their technology, their culture. Primdeck shook his head. I must advise against this course of action. We know nothing about these beings. They could be dangerous. They could be carriers of unknown diseases. They could have technologies that we do not understand. But they have been asleep for 200 years, Dr. Veltar argued. Even if they were once dangerous, they are helpless now. This is a perfect opportunity for safe study. Kethler considered both arguments. As a scientist, he was fascinated by the possibility of studying a completely unknown species. As a leader, he was responsible for the safety of his crew. It was a difficult decision. We will proceed with caution, he finally decided. Prepare a boarding party of 6 individuals. Full environmental suits and all safety protocols will be followed. We will examine the vessel and determine if it is safe to conduct further studies. The boarding party was quickly assembled. Dr. Veltar led the group, accompanied by 2 security officers, a technical specialist, and 2 research assistants. They crossed from the silent observer to the alien vessel through a temporary docking tube. The interior of the ship was dark and cold. Emergency lighting provided just enough illumination to see their way through the corridors. The air was stale but breathable, according to their instruments. The artificial gravity is still functioning, noted technical specialist Grexman as they moved deeper into the ship. Minimal power is being directed to life support systems. They found the first chamber containing the suspended animation pods after 20 minutes of careful exploration. The room was vast, stretching out beyond the range of their lights. Rows upon rows of cylindrical containers lined the walls and filled the floor space. Each pod was about the size of a Zephyrian but clearly designed for a different body type. Dr. Veltar approached one of the pods and activated her scanning equipment. Remarkable, she whispered. The being inside is still alive. The life support systems are functioning perfectly after all this time. Through the transparent window of the pod, they could see the occupant. It was smaller than a Zephyrian, with pale skin and dark hair on its head. The facial features were alien but somehow familiar, suggesting intelligence and emotion. The species appears to be mammalian, Dr. Veltar observed. Bipedal with opposable thumbs. The brain structure suggests high intelligence. Should we wake one of them? Asked research assistant Nixtel, Primdeck, who was monitoring their progress. From the silent observer, immediately responded through their communication system. Absolutely not. We have no idea how this species might react to being awakened. They could be hostile. They could be confused and dangerous. But Dr. Veltar was already studying the pod's control systems. The revival process appears to be automated and safe. We could wake a small number for questioning and study. The decision would change everything for both species, though none of the Zephyrians realized it at the time. In those pods lay sleeping members of humanity, a species that the galaxy had never truly encountered. They were about to learn that some things should be left undisturbed. The revival process began with a soft humming sound that filled the chamber. Dr. Veltar watched her instruments carefully as the first pod started its awakening sequence. The other Zephyrians stood back, their weapons ready, but not drawn. They expected the being inside to wake up slowly and confused, like most species did after long periods of suspended animation. The pod they had chosen contained a male specimen with short dark hair and a muscular build. According to the ship's records, which technical specialist Grexman had managed to access, the being's name was Jake Morrison. The file indicated he had been some kind of engineer before entering suspended animation. The revival process is proceeding normally, Dr. Veltar reported to the others. Brain activity is increasing. Heart rate is rising to normal levels. The subject should be conscious in approximately 3 minutes. On the silent observer, Chief Researcher Kethlar monitored the situation through their communication link. Remember, we want to observe the subject's natural behavior. Do not approach too closely until we understand how this species reacts to awakening. The pod's life support systems worked smoothly, warming the occupant's body and slowly bringing all biological functions back to normal activity. Dr. Veltar had studied many different species over the years, and she was impressed by how well designed these human revival systems were. Most species required much more complex procedures to safely wake from suspended animation. The pod's cover began to open with a quiet hiss. Vapor escaped as the internal atmosphere equalized with the chamber's air. The Zephyrians watched with fascination as the being's eyelids fluttered and then opened. Jake Morrison's eyes snapped open suddenly, completely alert. This was not the slow, confused awakening the Zephyrians had expected. In one smooth motion, Jake sat up in his pod, his eyes quickly scanning the chamber and taking in every detail. He saw the strange alien figures standing around him, noted their positions and observed their equipment. "Remarkable," Dr. Veltar whispered. "The subject shows no signs of disorientation. Most species require several minutes to recover from suspended animation." Jake's military training kicked in immediately. Without showing any sign of panic or confusion, he assessed the situation. Unknown aliens had awakened him from cryosleep. They had weapons, but were not directly threatening him. They seemed to be scientists rather than soldiers based on their equipment and behavior. "Hello," Jake said in a calm, steady voice. "I'm Jake Morrison. Can you understand me?" Dr. Veltar activated her translation device. "Greetings, Jake Morrison. I am Dr. Veltar. We are researchers from the Zephyrian scientific expedition. We found your vessel drifting in space and decided to investigate." Jake nodded, still taking in information about his surroundings. "How long have we been asleep?" "According to our analysis, approximately 200 of your years," Dr. Veltar replied. Jake's expression did not change, but the Zephyrians noticed a slight tightening around his eyes. "And my crewmates? The other colonists?" "Many are still alive in their pods. We have only awakened you for initial contact." Jake slowly moved his legs over the side of the pod and stood up. The Zephyrians were surprised by how quickly he recovered his balance and coordination. Most beings needed much longer to regain full motor control after extended suspended animation. "I need to check on my people," Jake said, moving toward the nearest row of pods. "Please wait," Dr. Veltar said, stepping forward. "We need to conduct some basic medical examinations first. We want to ensure you are healthy and that there are no biological incompatibilities between our species." Jake stopped and turned back to face the aliens. His expression remained friendly, but there was something in his eyes that made the Zephyrians slightly uncomfortable. "I appreciate your concern, but I need to see my people first. We insist on following proper protocols," Dr. Veltar said, pulling out a small device that looked like a medical scanner. "This will only take a few minutes." That was when Jake's demeanor changed completely. In one fluid motion, he grabbed Dr. Veltar's wrist and twisted the device away from her. Before any of the other Zephyrians could react, Jake had the scanner in his own hand and was pointing it at them. "I said I need to check on my people," Jake repeated, his voice now carrying a clear edge of authority. The two security officers reached for their weapons, but Jake was faster. He threw the scanner at one officer, hitting him in the center of his chest and knocking him backward. In the same motion, Jake rolled behind the nearest pod for cover. "Stun him," one of the security officers shouted, pulling out his weapon. But Jake was no longer where they expected him to be. Using the pods as cover, he moved quickly through the chamber. The Zephyrians found themselves unable to get a clear shot without risking damage to the suspended animation equipment. "Subject is displaying unexpected tactical awareness," Dr. Veltar reported to the silent observer. "Recommend immediate backup." Jake appeared suddenly behind the second security officer, having moved silently between the pods. Before the alien could turn around, Jake had disarmed him and taken his weapon. The device was unfamiliar, but Jake's engineering background helped him understand its basic operation within seconds. "Nobody move," Jake said, now holding the alien weapon. "I don't want to hurt anyone, but I will if you try to stop me from checking on my people." The Zephyrian stood frozen, unsure how to respond. This was not going according to any of their protocols. The being they had awakened was supposed to be confused and dependent on them for information and assistance. Instead, he had quickly taken control of the situation. "Jake Morrison," Dr. Veltar said carefully, "we are not your enemies. We are scientists. We only want to help you and your people." "Then let me wake up some of my crew," Jake replied. Starting with our medical officer and our colony administrator. Jake moved to 2 specific pods, checking the nameplates until he found the ones he wanted. The Zephyrians watched in amazement as he operated the human revival systems with confidence and skill. It was clear that this being understood his own species' technology very well. The first pod to open contained a woman with brown hair and intelligent eyes. According to the nameplate, she was Lisa Kane, Colonial Administrator. Like Jake, she awakened quickly and alertly. "Jake?" she said, sitting up immediately. "What's our status?" "We've got company," Jake replied, nodding toward the Zephyrians. "They say we've been asleep for 200 years. Lisa's eyes quickly assessed the situation, taking in the alien beings and Jake's defensive posture. "Are they hostile?" "They claim to be scientists, but they tried to sedate me when I wanted to check on the crew." The second pod opened to reveal a Hispanic man with steady hands and observant eyes. This was Tony Rodriguez, the colony ship's head of maintenance. He also awakened quickly and clearly. "Aliens?" Tony asked, looking at the Zephyrians. "Researchers, they say," Jake answered. "They found our ship drifting." Tony nodded and stood up, moving to examine the nearest pod's control systems. "Life support is still functioning. Most of our people are still alive." The 3 humans exchanged looks that the Zephyrians could not interpret. There seemed to be communication happening between them, but it was too subtle for the aliens to understand. "We need to wake up Colonel Williams," Lisa said quietly. "Agreed," Jake replied. "And Dr. Taylor, we need to know what shape our ship is in." Dr. Veltar stepped forward. "Please, we can help you. There is no need for conflict. We are peaceful researchers." Jake looked at her for a long moment. "Then prove it. Let us wake up our people without interference. Let us assess our situation, and maybe we can talk." The Zephyrians considered this. The situation had already gone far beyond their expectations. These beings were not behaving like any species they had encountered before. They showed no signs of confusion or dependency. Instead, they were organized, alert, and clearly capable of working together effectively. "Very well," Dr. Veltar said finally. "But we must insist on monitoring the process. We are responsible for your safety." Jake smiled, but it was not a particularly friendly expression. "We'll take care of our own safety. You just stay back and watch." As the 3 humans began awakening more of their crew, the Zephyrians realized they might have made a serious mistake. These beings were not primitive specimens to be studied. They were something else entirely. And the aliens were beginning to understand that they had awakened something they might not be able to control. Back on the Silent Observer, Chief Researcher Kethlar watched the situation with growing concern. "Dr. Veltar," he said through the communication link, "I want you to return to the ship immediately. We need to reassess this situation." But it was already too late. The humans were awake, and they were not going back to sleep. Within 1 hour, the situation had changed completely. Jake Morrison, Lisa Kane, and Tony Rodriguez had awakened 12 more humans from their pods. Each person who woke up showed the same instant alertness that had surprised the Zephyrians. None of them seemed confused or weak after 2 centuries of sleep. Colonel Beth Williams was the first military officer they revived. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. The moment she sat up in her pod, she looked around the chamber and understood exactly what was happening. "Report," she said to Jake in a calm, authoritative voice. "Unknown. Alien species found our ship," Jake replied quickly. "They claim to be scientists. We've been asleep for 200 years. They tried to sedate me when I wanted to check on the crew." Colonel Williams nodded and stood up. She walked over to where the Zephyrians were standing and looked them up and down. The aliens felt uncomfortable under her steady gaze. "I am Colonel Beth Williams, Military commander of this colony expedition, she said. What are your intentions regarding my people? Dr. Veltar tried to maintain her scientific composure. We are researchers. We found your ship drifting and wanted to study your species. We mean no harm. Then why did you try to drug one of my officers? Colonel Williams asked. It was a standard medical procedure, Dr. Veltar explained. We needed to ensure biological compatibility. Colonel Williams looked at Jake, who shook his head slightly. The colonel turned back to the aliens. My people will handle their own medical needs. You will step back and allow us to continue our revival procedures. The Zephyrians had no choice but to agree. They watched in growing amazement as the humans worked together with perfect coordination. Each person who was awakened immediately took on specific tasks without being told what to do. Dr. Nick Taylor was a systems engineer who immediately went to check the ship's computer systems. Amy Foster was a communications specialist who began trying to access the ship's transmitter arrays. Carl Brook was a maintenance engineer who started examining the modifications the aliens had made to their ship's power systems. They have been inside our ship for weeks, Carl reported to Colonel Williams. They have connected their equipment to our power grid and downloaded copies of our computer files. Colonel Williams' expression grew cold. They have been studying us without permission. Amy Foster looked up from a communications console. Colonel, I'm detecting energy signatures from an alien vessel docked to our ship. It appears they brought us aboard their research station. Size and capabilities? Colonel Williams asked. Smaller than our ship, but with more advanced technology, Amy replied. I'm reading weapons systems and defensive shields. Tony Rodriguez had been quietly examining the chamber around them. Colonel, I think we have a bigger problem. Look at this. He led the group to a wall display that showed the status of all the cryogenic pods in their section. They haven't just awakened us. They've been taking biological samples from other pods in blood, tissue, genetic material. The humans exchanged dark looks. Dr. Veltar tried to explain. It was necessary for our research. We needed to understand your species' biology. Without consent, Colonel Williams said, you have been experimenting on my people while they slept. The tension in the room became thick enough to cut. The Zephyrians began to realize that their actions, which they considered standard scientific procedure, were being viewed very differently by the humans. Back on the Silent Observer, Chief Researcher Kethler was receiving regular reports from the boarding party. What he was hearing made him increasingly worried. Dr. Veltar, please report your current status, he said through the communication link. The subjects are awake and active, Dr. Veltar replied. They are displaying remarkable organization and technical competence. They appear to have military structure and discipline. Are they cooperating with your research? There was a pause before Dr. Veltar answered. They are not hostile, but they are not cooperating either. They seem to view our scientific procedures as violations of their rights. Kethlar felt a chill. In all his years of research, he had never encountered a species that questioned the right of advanced civilizations to study primitive ones. Maintain your position. I am calling for additional support. Colonel Williams had been listening to the alien communication through their translation devices. Jake, Tony, I want you to take a team and explore the connection between our ship and theirs. Amy, keep trying to establish communications with any other human settlements that might be out there. Dr. Taylor, I need a full assessment of our ship's capabilities. The humans spread out to complete their tasks. The Zephyrians found themselves effectively ignored as the colonists took control of their own situation. Jake and Tony discovered that the alien ship was indeed connected to theirs through multiple docking tubes. The aliens had been coming and going freely, treating the human ship like their personal laboratory. Look at this, Tony said, pointing to monitoring equipment the aliens had installed throughout the human corridors. They've been watching everything, recording everything. Meanwhile, Dr. Taylor had accessed the ship's main computer system. What he found made his blood run cold. Colonel, you need to see this. Colonel Williams joined him at the main computer terminal. Dr. Taylor had pulled up files that showed the aliens had been cataloging human technology, biological samples, and cultural artifacts for weeks. They've been preparing a complete scientific report on our species, Dr. Taylor said. Look at this classification. On the screen was a document written in Zephyrian scientific language, but the translation was clear. Humans were classified as primitive species 7739, suitable for extended study and possible relocation. Relocation? Colonel Williams asked. Dr. Taylor scrolled through more files. It appears they plan to move our entire population to research facilities for long-term observation and experimentation. Amy Foster's voice came over the ship's communication system. Colonel, I'm picking up transmissions from the alien ship. They're calling for reinforcements. A military vessel is on its way. Colonel Williams made a decision that would change everything. All personnel, this is the Colonel. We are no longer guests. We are prisoners scheduled for transportation to alien research facilities. As of this moment, we are in a state of emergency. All crew members are to report to their duty stations immediately. The ship's emergency systems activated. Lights came on throughout the vessel as dormant systems powered up. The humans had been conserving power for over 2 centuries, but now they were bringing their ship back to full operational status. Dr. Veltar and her team watched in alarm as the human ship came alive around them. What are you doing? She asked Colonel Williams. What we should have done from the beginning, the Colonel replied. Taking care of ourselves. Carl Brook had been working on the ship's power systems. Colonel, I can disconnect us from their ship and restore our independent power grid. Do it, Colonel Williams ordered. But you'll lose life support, Dr. Veltar protested. Your ship has been running on our power for weeks. Dr. Taylor looked up from his console. Actually, no. We've been running on our own backup power the whole time. Your people just thought they were powering our systems. The Zephyrians stared in shock. Their instruments had clearly shown that the human ship was powered down and dependent on their energy supplies. You've been deceiving us, Dr. Veltar said. Jake Morrison smiled. No, we've been sleeping. But our ship was designed to keep us safe even while we slept. Did you really think we would build colony ships that couldn't protect themselves? Suddenly, the docking clamps released and the 2 ships began to separate. The Zephyrians found themselves trapped aboard a fully operational human vessel that was no longer under their control. Amy Foster's voice echoed through the ship again. Colonel, I'm getting responses to our emergency broadcasts. There are human settlements throughout this sector. We're not alone. Colonel Williams nodded grimly. Good. Send them our situation report. Tell them we have first contact with an alien species that considers us laboratory specimens. On the silent observer, Chief Researcher Kethalar watched his boarding party's life signs disappear from his screens as the human ship moved away. For the first time in his long career, he realized he might have made a terrible mistake. Send an immediate message to Hegemony Command, he told his communications officer. Tell them we need military assistance, and tell them to revise the classification of species 7739. They are not primitive. Over the next 6 hours, the human colony ship became a hive of activity. Colonel Williams had authorized the awakening of 500 more colonists, choosing people with specific skills they would need. The ship that had been silent and dark for 2 centuries was now filled with voices, footsteps, and the hum of working machinery. The humans worked with an efficiency that amazed their Zephyrian prisoners. Dr. Veltar and her team were not mistreated, but they were clearly under guard, and their movements were restricted. They watched from the main observation deck as humans transformed their ship from a drifting relic into a functioning fortress. Jake Morrison had taken charge of the defense preparations. He worked with a team of former soldiers and engineers to set up protective barriers throughout the ship. The humans had awakened people who had fought in something they called the Resource Wars, conflicts that the Zephyrians knew nothing about. How many military personnel were on this colony ship? Dr. Veltar asked Lisa Kane, who had been assigned to watch the alien prisoners. About 800, Lisa replied. Colony ships always carried military protection. Space can be a dangerous place. Dr. Veltar was confused. But this was supposed to be a peaceful colonization mission. Lisa looked at her with surprise. Of course it was peaceful. But that doesn't mean we were naive. We always planned for the possibility of hostile contact. Meanwhile, Dr. Nick Taylor had made a disturbing discovery in the alien research files. He called Colonel Williams to the main computer center. "Colonel, I've been going through the data the aliens collected," Dr. Taylor said. "They haven't just been studying us. They've been to other human sites." Colonel Williams studied the information on the screen. "How many other sites?" "At least 12, Dr. Taylor replied. "Abandoned colonies, derelict ships, research stations, all classified as archaeological sites, all treated as ruins of an extinct civilization." "Extinct?" Colonel Williams' voice was sharp. "That's how they've been cataloging us. The galactic community thinks humanity is dead." Amy Foster joined them at the computer terminal. "Colonel, I've been monitoring their communications. The alien reinforcements will arrive in approximately 4 hours. It's a military vessel called the Dominion's Edge." "Military capabilities?" Colonel Williams asked. "Unknown, but it's significantly larger than the research ship," Amy replied. "I'm also picking up more responses from human settlements. There are colonies, mining operations, and research stations throughout this sector of space." Colonel Williams nodded. "How many people are we talking about?" "Hard to estimate from the signal strength, but at least several million humans scattered across dozens of systems." This information changed everything. The humans were not a small group of survivors. They were part of a larger population that had been living and working in space for 2 centuries, completely unknown to the galactic community. Carl Brook had been working on integrating alien technology with human systems. "Colonel, I think you should see what we've accomplished." He led her to the ship's weapons control center. The humans had managed to combine their own defensive systems with technology they had taken from the Zephyrian ship. "We've created hybrid weapons that are more powerful than anything either species had separately," Carl explained. "Human engineering principles combined with alien energy technology." Colonel Williams was impressed. "How long to complete the integration?" "We're already done with the primary systems," Carl replied. "We've also reinforced our hull using their shield technology. This ship is now considerably more dangerous than it was when we went to sleep." The Zephyrians were becoming increasingly worried as they watched the humans work. Dr. Veltar had tried several times to contact her ship, but the humans were jamming all communications. "You don't understand," Dr. Veltar said to Lisa Kane. "The galactic hegemony has rules about first contact. There are procedures that must be followed." "Whose procedures?" Lisa asked. "We never agreed to any galactic rules. But you must understand. You are a primitive species. You need guidance and protection from more advanced civilizations." Lisa stared at her for a long moment. "Primitive? We've been living in space for over 200 years. We've built colonies on hostile worlds. We've survived wars, disasters, and the vacuum of space itself. What exactly makes us primitive?" Dr. Veltar struggled to explain. "Your technology is crude. Your social structures are inefficient. Your species shows signs of aggressive tendencies." "Aggressive?" Lisa's voice carried a dangerous edge. "We were sleeping peacefully in our own ship when you decided to experiment on us without permission. Who exactly is being aggressive here?" The conversation was interrupted by an announcement from Amy Foster. "All personnel, this is communications. We have established contact with the human colony at New Terra. They are sending a defense fleet to our location." Colonel Williams received this news with satisfaction. She had been hoping that other human settlements would respond quickly to their emergency broadcast. Dr. Taylor approached her with another report. "Colonel, I've finished analyzing the alien cultural database. I think you need to understand how the galactic community operates." "Tell me," Colonel Williams said. "The galactic hegemony is a coalition of species that maintains order through technological superiority," Dr. Taylor explained. "They classify all species based on their level of advancement. Species below a certain level are considered subjects rather than equals, and they classified us as subjects, below subjects. They classified us as specimens." Colonel Williams felt her anger rising, but she kept her voice calm. "What gives them the right to make that determination?" "According to their files, it's based on the principle that advanced species have a responsibility to guide and protect primitive ones, even against their will? The concept of will doesn't seem to apply to species they consider primitive. This explanation helped Colonel Williams understand why the Zephyrians had acted as they did. From their perspective, humans were not people with rights. They were interesting animals to be studied and managed. Primdek, the Zephyrian cultural analyst, had been listening to these conversations. He approached Colonel Williams hesitantly. "Colonel Williams," he said, "I believe there has been a fundamental misunderstanding." "Explain," Colonel Williams replied. "My people made assumptions about your species based on incomplete information. We thought you were extinct or had failed to develop properly. We never considered that you might have chosen to remain separate from galactic civilization. So you decided to study us like laboratory animals." Primdek looked uncomfortable. "It is standard procedure when dealing with unknown species. We meant no disrespect." "No disrespect?" Colonel Williams' voice rose slightly. "You stole samples from our people while they slept. You planned to relocate us to research facilities. You treated us like property." "But you must understand," Primdek said desperately. "The galaxy has rules. There is an established order. Species must be properly classified and integrated." "Whose rules?" Colonel Williams asked. "We never agreed to be part of your galactic order. We never asked to be classified by anyone." Jake Morrison joined the conversation. "Colonel, our defensive preparations are complete. We're ready for whatever they send against us." Colonel Williams nodded. "Good, because I have a feeling this is going to get much more complicated before it gets simpler." Amy Foster's voice came over the communication system again. "Colonel, I'm detecting the approach of the alien military vessel. Estimated arrival in 2 hours. Any word from our people?" "Yes, ma'am. The new Terra Defense Fleet will arrive approximately 30 minutes after the alien ship. We're going to have to hold our own until then." Colonel Williams looked at the Zephyrian prisoners. "Dr. Veltar, I suggest you contact your military vessel and explain the situation. Tell them that any attack on this ship will be considered an act of war against humanity." "You don't understand," Dr. Veltar said. "They won't believe that humans are capable of defending themselves. They will assume you are being controlled by some other species." "Then they're going to learn something new today," Colonel Williams replied. "Because we're not going back to sleep, and we're not going to anyone's research facility." The stage was set for a confrontation that would change how the galaxy viewed humanity. The aliens were about to discover that their assumptions about primitive species were dangerously wrong. The Hegemony battle group arrived exactly when Amy Foster had predicted. The Dominion's Edge was a massive warship, 3 times larger than the human colony ship. It brought with it 2 escort vessels and a command carrier. Admiral Thekmore commanded the fleet from his flagship, expecting to handle a simple research incident. "This is Admiral Thekmore of the Galactic Hegemony," came the transmission to both ships. "Research vessel Silent Observer, report your status immediately." Chief Researcher Kethler responded from his ship, which was still drifting powerless near the human vessel. "Admiral, we have encountered an unexpected situation. The specimens we awakened have taken hostile action against our boarding party." "Specimens?" Admiral Thekmore was confused. "You mean the primitive artifacts you were studying?" "The artifacts are not artifacts, Admiral. They are a living species in suspended animation, and they are not primitive." Admiral Thekmore studied the readings from his ship's sensors. The human vessel was definitely active and appeared to be armed. "Explain how primitive specimens managed to capture your research team." "I believe we have seriously misjudged this species, Admiral." From the human ship, Colonel Williams opened a communication channel to the Hegemony fleet. "Admiral Thekmore, this is Colonel Beth Williams of the human colony ship New Dawn. We need to talk." There was a long pause before Admiral Thekmore responded. His voice carried surprise and confusion. "You are claiming to represent the specimen species." "I am representing my people," Colonel Williams replied firmly. "We are not specimens, we are not subjects, we are human beings with the right to determine our own fate." Admiral Thekmore had dealt with many different species during his long military career, but he had never encountered anything like this. According to all galactic records, this species should not even be capable of space travel, let alone military resistance. Colonel Williams, you will immediately release the Zephyrian research team and submit to Hegemony Authority for proper processing and relocation. Negative, Colonel Williams replied. We will release your people unharmed when you withdraw your forces and recognize our sovereignty. Sovereignty? Admiral Thekmore was stunned. You are a newly discovered species. You have no legal standing in galactic law. We never agreed to your galactic law, Colonel Williams said. We have been living in space for over 2 centuries without your permission or knowledge. We don't need your recognition to exist. Dr. Nick Taylor had been monitoring the alien communications. Colonel, they're discussing the possibility of using force to disable our ship and retrieve their people. Colonel Williams had expected this. Jake, are our defensive systems ready? All systems operational, Jake Morrison replied from the Weapons Control Center. We have targeting locks on all 3 enemy vessels. Enemy vessels? Admiral Thekmore had been listening to the human communications. We are not your enemies. We are here to help you integrate properly into galactic civilization. By tier force? Colonel Williams asked. By necessity, Admiral Thekmore replied. Some species require guidance to understand their proper place in the galactic order. That was when Amy Foster made an announcement that changed everything. Colonel, I'm receiving multiple signals. The new Terra Defense Fleet has arrived. On Boise. His command screen, Admiral Thekmore watched in amazement as 12 human ships appeared at the edge of the system. They were different designs from the colony ship, clearly built for military purposes. More ships continued to arrive as he watched. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, I'm reading 18 human vessels and more incoming. Some of these ships are showing energy signatures comparable to our own technology. Admiral Thekmore realized he was no longer dealing with a simple research incident. How is this possible? Our intelligence indicated this species was extinct or primitive. Colonel Williams answered his question. Your intelligence was wrong, Admiral. Humanity never died out. We just chose to stay away from galactic politics. But your technology, Admiral Thekmore began, is different from yours, Colonel Williams interrupted. That doesn't make it primitive. We've been adapting and improving for 2 centuries while you assumed we were gone. Captain Joe Mitchell of the new Terra Defense Force opened a communication channel. Admiral Thekmore, this is Captain Mitchell. You are ordered to withdraw from human space immediately. Human space? Admiral Thekmore was struggling to understand the situation. There is no such thing as human space. This species is not recognized by the galactic hegemony. We don't need your recognition, Captain Mitchell replied. We have 27 colonies, 15 mining operations, and 8 research stations in this sector alone. We've been here longer than your hegemony has existed. Dr. Taylor had been monitoring galactic communication networks. Colonel, human settlements throughout the galaxy are responding to our situation. They're sending ships. Amy Foster confirmed this. I'm tracking at least 60 human vessels converging on our location from different star systems. Admiral Thekmore found himself facing a completely unprecedented situation. What he had thought was a minor research incident involving primitive specimens had turned into a potential war with an unknown galactic power. This is impossible, he said. If humans had this level of organization and technology, we would have detected them. Only if we wanted to be detected, Colonel Williams replied. We learned long ago that it's often better to be underestimated. Carl Brooke had been working on the ship's communication systems. Colonel, I've managed to access the hegemony's information networks. They have files on dozens of human sites they've investigated over the years. What kind of files? Archaeological surveys. They found human colonies, research stations, even battlefield sites. They classified all of them as ruins of an extinct civilization. Colonel Williams understood. They found places we had abandoned or lost and assumed those represented our entire civilization. Exactly. They never looked for living human populations. Admiral Thekmore was receiving reports from across the galaxy. Human ships were appearing near hegemony installations, demanding the return of artifacts and biological samples that had been taken from human sites over the years. Admiral, His communications officer reported, "We are receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. They want an immediate report on the situation." Admiral Thekmore looked at the growing fleet of human ships surrounding his forces. He was outnumbered and facing technology he didn't fully understand. More importantly, he was beginning to realize that the hegemony had made a serious error in judgment. "Colonel Williams," he said finally, "I believe we need to discuss this situation more carefully." "I agree," Colonel Williams replied. "But first, you will withdraw your ships to a safe distance and return all human artifacts and biological samples in your possession." "And if we refuse?" Colonel Williams's voice carried the weight of 2 centuries of human survival in hostile space. "Then you'll discover why the galaxy is littered with human battlefield sites, Admiral. We didn't survive this long by backing down from fights." Jake Morrison monitored the alien ships as they slowly pulled back. "Colonel, they're withdrawing." "Good," Colonel Williams said. "Amy, send a message to all human settlements. Tell them it's time the galaxy learned that humanity is very much alive." Dr. Veltar, who had been listening to everything, approached Colonel Williams. "You have won this confrontation," she said quietly. "But the hegemony will not forget this. This will change everything." Colonel Williams looked at her with a slight smile. "Good. It's about time things changed." As human ships continued to arrive from across the galaxy, Admiral Thekmore sent his report to the Galactic Council. The message was simple but revolutionary. Recommend immediate revision of human species classification. Previous assessment of extinct or primitive species was incorrect. Humanity appears to be a major galactic civilization that has remained hidden from hegemony contact. The age of human isolation was over. The galaxy was about to learn that sleeping giants should never be awakened unless you're prepared for the consequences. 3 days later, formal diplomatic contact was established between humanity and the galactic hegemony. The negotiations would be long and complex, but one thing was clear from the beginning. Humanity would never again be treated as specimens or subjects. They had made sure of that.